Since I was a teenager, I've always been attracted to so-called traditional societies, and then to developing countries. When I was 25, I'd already visited 25 countries, nearly half of which were third world countries. I'd made several trips here to Mentirano, and I liked the place more and more. I knew the people better and better, and also the islands, which I love. From my first visits to Mentirano, and more particularly to the islands here, I soon realized there was a problem with the consumption and sale of sea turtles. At the time when the project came along, there were about 10 turtle butchers in town, and consumption of turtle meat was an everyday thing.
It's 5 a.m. The sun will soon come up over Mentirano, a small fishing town on the west coast of Madagascar. Géraud Leroux and his crew of Malagasy fishermen are getting ready for another scientific expedition to the archipelago of the Barren Isles. Since 2006, Géraud, supported by his wife Lola, has been carrying out a program of research and conservation on sea turtles and also on the Vezo people, to whom he's particularly attached.
My wife is from a Vezo family, originally from the fishing village of Pasmandur here in Mentirano. Vezo etymologically means the people who row. So that says it all. Even the name of the ethnic group talks about their fishing-related activity.
The Barren Isles archipelago is made up of about 10 small islands off the coast of Madagascar. Between March and December, the Vezo people, one of the last semi-nomadic coastal populations, settle for several months on these islands, where there's neither drinking water or electricity. As part of his research project, Géraud is going to the island of Nosimantal to join these fishing families. After 3 hours on a rough sea, Géraud and his crew finally arrive on the island.
I feel a bit like the naturalists with the first explorers here. For a start, we're in virgin territory, and I've always tried to view the issues from a global perspective. And actually, that's also why the project is called Interdisciplinary Network for Sustainable Management of Marine Biodiversity. I have to say, there's plenty to do, whether we're talking about sharks, sea cucumbers, or whales. So why turtles? Because they're sort of the emblem for endangered marine species. There are a lot of islands across the world where turtles have more or less died out. And at one time, a few decades ago, we had reached a critical threshold.
Géraud chose the Barren Isles archipelago because it's a favourite place for turtles, who go there to feed and to lay their eggs. To collect his research data, he has to catch the turtles and bring them back to the beach. This particular fishing, methodical and very physical, is carried out using traditional dugout canoes only. Géraud therefore recruited former turtle fishermen. Deuk, Philly, Mendra and Naud have shared the adventure with him from the very beginning. Naud has been visiting the Barren Isles since the 1960s. Before going to sea, he takes care to make offerings to the spirits in order to gain their protection.
He comes to ask for the mercy of the island spirits, so that the fishing is good, the weather is clement, and there are no accidents. Usually in the Malagasy populations, they make these incantations with rum. But here on the islands, we only offer sugary, sweet things. is to placate the spirits. You mustn't give them rum or hot things because that would stir them up.
Once the camp is set up, the crew is ready to go back out to sea.
3 of the 4 men in the crew are Vezo, so they did the same as the people here, and they fished for turtles too. Obviously the technique itself was well established before I arrived. It's really the typical Vezo technique for turtle fishing. The captures depend on the island we go to. Nosimantal, where we are, is usually the place where we catch the most turtles.
The green turtle, one of the 5 species of turtle which visit the Barren Isles archipelago, suffers from fibropapillomas, a virus which can be fatal. One of the aims of the captures is to check on the health of the turtle populations in the area.
We catch them at high tide when the turtles come to feed on the reefs surrounding the islands. The first task is observation, because we have to spot the turtles. You've seen sailors watching the sea trying to spot turtles. Then we spread the net outside of the reef, but always in water that's 3 to 5 meters deep at the most. We make a noise by hitting the canoe when we're on the inside of the reef, so towards the island. But then the turtles will get scared and leave the reef, and they get caught in the net.
The fishermen quickly have to remove the turtles from the nets. The operation is not without danger, since the current could push the boat onto the nearby rocks. Not to mention that the divers could get caught in the nets or hit by the boat's propeller.
Safety here is one of the main concerns, because there's no coast guard, no means of communication. You can imagine that if anything ever happened, the nearest hospital is a long way away.
After 3 hours of fishing on the edge of the coral reef, the fishermen come in just before nightfall.
This is a good catch. Most of them are small, but it's still a good catch. It's not every day we catch 10 turtles in one trip. We put them on their backs like this because it's the only way to stop them struggling, and we can keep them all quiet while we process them all. This is really the island where we catch the most turtles. Strangely, it's an island where the turtles don't lay eggs. I don't know if it's the texture of the sand or what, but it's the island where we find the most turtles. They probably feed on the collections of plants around here. Among these turtles they've caught today, several of them have fibropapillomas.
Audrey Campillo joined Géraud Leroux's team in 2008. Fascinated by sea turtles since she was a young child, the biologist is carrying out research into fibropapillomas, a virus which causes tumours to grow on the soft parts of the turtles.
I photographed the eyes of each turtle that's caught because there was a study carried out in Florida which showed that by studying the colour of the eyes, it's possible to see whether the turtles have already had the disease. So if the conjunctivitis has already healed, or if they're soon going to get it, there's a white band at the edge of the eye.
At an advanced stage of the disease, swellings can be observed around the eyes, which considerably reduce the turtle's field of vision. Once they become weak, they'll be caught more easily in nets or by predators. Since the beginning of his research, Géraud has noted that around 25% of the turtles captured are infected with the disease.
Some of the first captures made in Géraud's study showed that in certain turtles the disease had disappeared. They were caught in the beginning with tumours and later they disappeared. On the other hand, other turtles which were without disease were caught again after 6 months with an advanced stage of fibropapillomas. So in some turtles the disease regresses, but in others it advances quickly, and that's worrying.
Fibropapillomas are caused by a virus. It appeared in Hawaii and Florida in the 1940s. Industrial pollution has often been identified as a vector for transmission of the disease. In my opinion, we can eliminate that theory here, because it's not the case here in the Barren Islands.
I'm measuring the straight length, actually the average straight length, as I'm measuring between the supracaudals.
The team hurries, as the turtles must be returned to the sea as quickly as possible. The data collected since the beginning of the project is used not only to assess the number of turtles with disease, but also to determine whether they're limited to a particular geographic area. Even though turtles do have a respiratory system that's adapted to life on land, they spend the majority of their time in the water. The green turtle, for example, can hold its breath for 3 hours.
Generally, we release them one at a time. As soon as one's ready, we let it go.
Turtles have an extraordinary sense of direction. Researchers believe that they could be sensitive to the Earth's magnetic field, which they use to return to lay their eggs at the exact spot where they were born.
There's also a hypothesis that once they've been captured and released, they'll leave that place. But that's certainly not true, because we recapture them sometimes. We've even recaptured some the very next day, so they've stayed very close by. It's funny sometimes to watch the reaction of the fishermen who watch us bring the turtles out and then put them back in the water. We can hear them saying, "That's a nice big one," as if they'd really like to eat it. Clearly the turtle populations here are declining. Unfortunately, there's still a lot, but things haven't quite clicked at local level. But you can ask Node and the older people here. Back in the day, there used to be 10, 15, 20 turtles laying eggs on a little island in one night, whereas now there are that many in a month, and that's the peak of laying. We've organized a lot of information and discussion workshops. We've organized informal campaigns to raise awareness on the islands, in the fishing villages. But unfortunately, it's an activity which is really rooted in tradition, and it's very difficult to stop.
Okay. Isn't the sun out yet?
The next morning at daybreak, the wind is blowing on the island of Nosimantal. In spite of the difficult sea conditions, Géraud's crew decides to go to sea, in the hope of making as good a catch as yesterday. Other Vezo fishermen go out too, looking for sharks, sea cucumbers, and sometimes turtles, which they'll sell later in the town.
Traditionally, the Vezo people weren't allowed to sell turtles. They were eaten in the family setting. So that would be the advantage of reviving those traditions. That's what I've tried to do with these awareness-raising campaigns, so that we try to get back to that point. If they're eaten occasionally, I don't think that poses a great danger to the species. But if they're sold, that's where the problem lies. Turtle fishing is relatively profitable. That's why, unfortunately, it's hard to eliminate and to manage.
Although sea turtles have been protected in Madagascar since 1923, they're under significant pressure from fishing. In spite of the awareness campaigns, the lack of resources given to the protection of ecosystems means that the consumption of eggs and turtle meat is still rising.
Given that with natural predation only one individual in 1,000 reaches sexual maturity, you can imagine the additional damage caused by human intervention in the evolution of the population.
Because of the bad weather mudging the water, the fishermen return empty-handed. So far the catch has been poor, with only 10 turtles captured. There's only one day left to complete their task. Time is short for Géraud and his crew.
When you're a Vezo fisherman, you have to be able to diversify. When the sea's rough, like today, you go and fish on the reef flat. When the water's clear, you dive with a snorkel for sea cucumbers. You really have to be prepared to diversify. At least the good sailors do. For the moment, they still have this semi-nomadic way of life. What worries me is that with overpopulation, with demographic pressure and pressure from migration, the islands, you've seen the size of these small islands. None of them is over a kilometre in length. I'm worried that the islands and the produce of the sea surrounding them will suffer from the overpopulation. It's the big threat in the years to come, because there are less and less fish on the west coast, particularly in the south. The area is more and more overfished, and the Vezo people will tend to come here more and more, placing ever greater pressure on the fish from the region.
Audrey's taking advantage of the low tide to collect seaweed samples, which she hopes will help her understand the origin of the virus affecting the green turtles.
In some parts of the world, particularly Hawaii and Australia, they've shown a connection between the presence of turtles suffering from fibropapillomas and certain microorganisms present on phanerogams or on certain seaweed. That's why I'm taking these samples, to try to see if we find these toxic seaweeds here or not. My aim is to discover why this disease has appeared in the Barren Isles, when generally in other parts of the world it appears in polluted areas where there's overpopulation or a stress for the turtles. This is a good area for research because Géraud has shown that there are some islands close to the coast where the disease is present and some a bit further out where there's no disease at all. But in the long term, if we can show why the disease is present here in terms of the causes of the disease, then we can try to find solutions to stop the disease and offer them elsewhere in the world.
Today's the last time Naud, Mendra, Philly and Deork are going to sea before they return to the town.
Since the start of the project, we've captured and identified around 1,400 turtles. I used to record all the data, but then I formed the crew because I couldn't always go out to the islands with them. I had a lot of admin work to do in town, and now they're completely autonomous at recording all the data. In the first 2 years, we also took DNA samples, which we then sent to IFREMA, where they looked at the origin of the sea turtle populations present here. And in fact, the Barren Islands populations here form a buffer zone between the populations in the Atlantic Ocean and those in the Indian Ocean.
Even though sea turtles are protected by law, Géraud is aware of the threats facing them. However, since the start of his project, he has noticed changes in the behaviour of the Vezo fishermen. Although turtles and their eggs are occasionally consumed on the islands, it's now more and more rare for them to be sold in main Tirano.
We've been working with Géraud for 5 years now, and I've noticed that the turtles are disappearing less quickly. Before, you could hardly find any. People ate a lot of them too. Today, people are eating fewer. I think it's a positive thing that the numbers are growing. 21 and a half.
Let me be clear. My aim isn't only to save a species, the turtles. I want to give the Vezo people the means to be able to maintain their traditions, to maintain their customs, their fishing techniques, etc., in the long term. Ideally, if the Vezo children can fish for turtles for around 100 years, so much the better. I feel I'm being useful in the sense that I hope to give them another perspective, another vision of the resources of the sea, to show them that you have to take care or the resources can run out. That's what's happened in many other places, and no one wants it to happen here.
Sea turtles have lived on our planet for 50 million years. Even though most of them are now on the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List, Géraud believes that there's still time to act to ensure their survival. Hence the idea of creating a protected marine area in the Barren Isles archipelago.
I very much hope that we'll succeed in the coming years. I think it's the only way to bring in a structure or an institution that can effectively manage the marine resources in the region. But I think that as we have a lot of elements already and we have plenty of arguments to set up this protected marine area, I have high hopes.
Pilai Poonswad is a well-known figure in Thailand. For more than 30 years, she has dedicated her life to the protection of the hornbill, the emblematic bird of the Thai forests.
My hornbill study began in 1978. Inspiration was the bird, you know. I saw the great hornbill at the nest. And then about 8 o'clock in the morning, the male came and right to the nest. So from that on, you know, I was very impressed.
After her first encounter with this intriguing bird, the biologist decided to create a foundation to study, treat, and protect hornbills in Thailand's 3 largest national parks. Today, she has earned the affectionate nickname, the grandmother of the hornbills. Of the 54 kinds of hornbills found on Earth, Thailand is home to 13. Right from the beginning of the Hornbill Project, Pilai Poonswad was concerned about the precarious situation of these birds, threatened by logging and poaching. Through patience and determination, Pilai has set up a network of partners who work alongside her to protect the hornbills and their habitat.
I had two phases of approach, First action is, or immediate action is how to stop poaching. And my goal is to increase the hornbill population. We have to encourage, but to educate, and also do the campaign, and also create the awareness of how important of the forest.
Accompanied by her research assistants, Pilai makes regular visits to the Budo Sungai Padi National Park in the south of Thailand, which has been crawling with guerrillas for many years. The armed conflict around the jungle does not make Pilai's task any easier, especially when she goes up into the mountains to observe the behavior of hornbills during their breeding period. The hornbill lives mainly in Southeast Asia, India, and Africa. To reproduce, it needs virgin forests where it can find a cavity large enough to make its nest among the huge trees.
After pairing, and then the pair will seek for nest hole when breeding season comes. They have courtship feeding. What fascinating me is the behavior. Yeah, the behavior that they, seal the nest, and the way it's a kind of ritual.
When she is ready to lay, the female walls herself up inside the nest to prevent predators such as monkeys, snakes, or monitor lizards from attacking her eggs. She leaves only a small opening through which the male regurgitates food to feed her and her chicks.
A male may have a role, in helping her by provide some material like bark, like earth, the mud, depend on species. And it takes about 3 to 7 days normally.
After more than an hour's walk up a steep track, Pilai arrives at the site where the most imposing Asiatic hornbill, the great hornbill, builds its nests. Endowed with a voluminous hollow casque which acts as a sound box to amplify its calls, the bird can grow to heights of up to 1 meter.
When the nests are not too far away, like this one, we usually work at about 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning and remain at our posts until 4 p.m. Then we go home. We do that every day.
In oppressive humidity and temperatures of 35 degrees Celsius, the team gets to work constructing the blind that will serve as an observation post. Besides her research assistants, Pilai is accompanied by villagers, most of whom are former poachers. They are particularly useful when the time comes to discover new nests. In spring, they are the only ones who carry out examination of nests and make sure they are in a fit state to welcome the female.
The poacher, I use them as a guide and train them, told them how to keep the record and, to observe. And so they participated in my project bit by bit, Then from there, they developed a kind of relationship between them and the hornbill that they watch. They would concern about the safety of that hornbill that they watch.
Thailand isn't the only country where hornbills are suffering the effects of human activities. In Singapore, just a 1-hour flight from southern Thailand, the hornbill is practically extinct. Thanks to a partnership with certain zoological gardens of Thailand, Mark Cremades, an expert in animal reproduction, is working on reintroducing the hornbill into protected areas in Singapore's national parks.
Hornbills disappeared in the late 19th century, around 1890. But the first couple to breed again in Singapore did so on a satellite island, not even on Singapore main island. This was in 1994, 100 years later. The natural environment has completely disappeared aside from a few patches of forest, which are usually national parks or protected forests. So there was a real sense of urgency. Having had experience of working in the wilderness, I thought we had to find new avenues of investigation. You can't stop human progress. It's impossible. So the issue is how to bring back forest animals that need a dense forest, how to get them back on an island that has one of the densest human populations in the world.
The morning is the best time to observe hornbills. The male has rested during the night, and he's busy in the morning, looking for food. He keeps going back and forth, again and again, looking for various types of food, if he has the energy.
The hornbill feeds mostly on fruit, its favorite food being figs, which represent 73% of its diet. But if the opportunity arises, it will also capture insects, small reptiles, birds, and rodents.
It has an important role in disperse the seed, also regenerate the forest, because hornbill feed on fruit and regurgitate bit by bit wherever they perch. So that way it's very good to distribute or disperse the seed. So hornbill play a very important role in keeping the forest or maintain the diversity of plant in the forest.
While hornbills were almost extinct in the early days of the project back in 1994, there are now around 200 nests and more than 500 birds in the Budo Park. Unfortunately, trees suitable for hosting new mating couples are becoming increasingly rare. That is even more the case in Singapore, where the forest is almost non-existent. So how can the problem be overcome in such a built-up environment?
The hornbill needs a large cavity to build its nest in. According to the Singapore authorities, a tree with a large hole in it is dangerous and likely to fall on account of the preponderance of lightning, wind, and storms. So it wasn't long before they said, look, we want to support this population, but it is difficult for us to keep these trees with big holes. They're a danger to people. Can't we think in terms of an artificial solution? We set up our first intelligent nest in the wild for a mating couple whose tree had been cut down. Their nest had been destroyed and burned, so as soon as the mating season came along, they immediately began searching for a cavity, and we gave them a very basic cavity. And they adopted this prefabricated nest in the very first year. So the following year, we thought, well, if you accepted this nest so readily, maybe we'll change it a little.
Of the 25 artificial nests set up in Singapore, 6 are so-called intelligent nests. When designing them, researchers sought to gain a better understanding of how hornbills reproduce. Every nest is equipped with 6 cameras linked up to a control room. This surveillance system records all activity 24 hours a day in and around the nest.
Every family of sensors, including optical sensors, the camera has revealed behavior. The female remains in the nest first, alone for 3 months, with her eggs and chicks. She replenishes all her main feathers. You can imagine a bird in a hole 30 centimeters wide by 60 or 70 centimeters high for 3 months. There's a lot of stuff. We have scales so that when the male brings food to the nest, we can measure his weight every day, every time he lands. We also know the weight of the food he passes on. And thanks to the cameras, we can identify the foods. So all this helps us better define the animals' needs and their restrictions in order to intensify our conservation efforts.
In Thailand a few years ago, Pilai and her partners set up artificial nests in Budo Park, where the species of tree most sought after by hornbills is still targeted by illegal loggers.
A lot of large tree gone. So that's why here we consider to have artificial nests. But here also very difficult to repair because the nest tree are very high and to access.
Our job is finished for today. The hornbill has devoted itself to its usual occupations, as it does every day. There's no change, nothing abnormal.
During the period of hornbill nesting, Pilai regularly visits the 11 villages taking part in the project to meet the villagers. Thanks to private donations collected by the foundation and the sponsorship of hornbills by Thai families, Pilai has hired more than 50 villagers since the project started to monitor nests. Most are former poachers who can now meet the needs of their families while protecting the natural environment.
Each village, each group, will report it. How many nests that they are, under their responsibility or under their watching, they're checking. And then how many nests still, carry on for breeding, or how many nests fail already, and what are the problem, and how to solve that problem for the, next breeding season.
As well as this action with the villagers, Pilai and Preda give workshops to school children to raise awareness of the beauty and also the fragility of these birds.
แล้วต้นไม้หรือที่หนูวาดต้นอะไรต้นตะเคียนเห็นไหมต้นตะเคียนนะเป็นต้นรังที่สำคัญนะแล้วนี่นกอะไรหรอกเนี่ยนกหัวแรดนะ It nearly gone from Thailand. I mean from Thailand. I will pay attention to the national status, conservation status of the species because it's our animal, right? So like to conserve. แล้วก็เด็กๆพวกนี้จะนะเป็นตัวแทนพี่ปิดาให้มาต่อไปในอนาคตนะโตขึ้นน่ะใช่ป่ะเนาะได้ไหมสอนต่อไปลูกสอนรุ่นน้องต่อใช่ไหมนะ
In order to observe hornbills in their natural environment, Pilai must often travel large distances in search of certain rarer species. As such, she has never had an opportunity to see a black hornbill in the wild. However, in the region of Sungai, some villagers claim to have seen the mysterious bird. After an hour and a half of driving, Pilai arrives at the swamp, from where she sets off to the bird-watching blind that Preda has set up.
Somebody, informed us that they saw black hornbill around, so that we kept checking every year.
While 13 species of hornbill are found in Thailand, some are very seldom seen, and more than half are facing the threat of extinction. The shrinking of the forests is the principal reason.
The subject of territory is a key one. It's been demonstrated for thousands of species that without human intervention, and if the population is stable and the environment is sufficiently rich for particular species, then it will flourish very, very well. And if the area is extended, then the species will colonize it. Not just birds, but also insects and even large mammals. All the work we did in Singapore, the investigative and development work carried out in Singapore for more than 6 years, was difficult to reproduce in Thailand. What she's continuing to do in Thailand today is impossible, since the animals disappeared. So she has carried on the job that she does so well, carried on mobilizing people. And what we're going to do is to try and bring the best possible tools for conditions on the ground, which are much more difficult in Thailand than they are in Singapore.
This one is so sensitive, so we have to hide ourselves very well, completely, and have to be very quiet. I ever survey, what long time ago, the area where they say that there's an existence of this species, but never succeeded. Only the villagers told us that, okay, there's the black hornbill, but never saw. Because sometimes the villager also mistaken with the other species, This is our first black hornbill nest in 17 years. So we are very happy, because this species is very, very rare. So for Thailand, we consider this as critical endangered species because they inhabit in lowland forest. Since lowland forest has, been shifted for cultivation, for plantation, that's why they lost habitat. Got เลื่อนเลยดูแบบนกแก๊กใช่แบบนกแก๊ก In Budo, I'm very happy that I could, work with the villagers and our team, and can increase like 500 individuals of 6 species within 17 years. The population is maybe too small to recover because just only one nest, within how many years? So it must have been very, very rare. Wow, one last. I hope that, we can find more.
We really have to raise the general awareness. And Pilai, in Thailand and in Asia, has really been a pioneer because she's awakened people's curiosity. She understood that you have to broaden the audience around nature. So I think we need to use every tool available if we're to succeed in changing what there is still time to change.
Seeing the change in mentality among her Thai partners and their commitment to protecting the hornbill, Pilai Poonswad can hope for a better future for the species. After all these years spent defending her protégés, the grandmother of the hornbills is still as passionate as ever about these birds, which she regards as tremendous ambassadors.
I think hornbill can be treated or recognized as umbrella species because they cover wide area and also they interact with so many diverse species. So if you protect hornbill, you protect other species.
Garth Mowat crisscrosses the craggy regions of British Columbia in search of the lord of these forests, the grizzly bear. This passionate biologist is interested in this powerful, lonely, wild animal that has always been an enigma to biologists.
I like the fact that it's hard to catch a grizzly. It makes calculations and stuff. It maneuvers. You need to know their habits and behavior. But I also like the fact that you can release them afterwards.
Garth Mowat's mission is to unravel the mystery of the grizzlies. Half of Canada's grizzly bears live in British Columbia. Before the Europeans arrived, the grizzlies' home stretched from the northwest of Canada to the South American border. Today, there are only a few isolated populations, which are scattered over the territory according to their feeding habits. The grizzly is now considered a species of special concern. That's one of the reasons that encouraged Garth Mowat's interest in this little-known mammal.
I began to research grizzlies in 1996. And most of my work consisted in making inventories for managers who wanted to know how many bears were in this park or that hunting ground. I did that all over British Columbia and Alberta. That was the start of my grizzly research.
Garth Mowat's research is based on studying grizzlies' DNA. While telemetry provides a way to monitor a few individuals over a small territory, DNA offers the possibility of studying several populations over a vast surface area of more than 10,000 square kilometers. Garth is en route towards the Flathead Valley Base Camp to join researcher Bruce McClellan. For around 30 years, Bruce has been studying a small population of grizzlies which lives mainly in the mountains. Garth takes advantage of the long journey to spot telltale signs of the presence of bears.
A rub tree has two purposes. One, to mark a territory, and two, for the male, it can be used as a warning during the mating season. There are lots of rub trees in a male grizzly's territory. I'm looking for trees that are used year after year. We want no more than 1 tree per kilometer, because when they're too close together, it's often the same grizzly rubbing the trees.
When he finds a rub tree, Garth notes its location. Then he wraps the tree in barbed wire. When the bear returns to scratch, hairs from its thick fur coat will snag on it without harming the animal.
This is a sample, and that's a pretty good sample. I think it'll work for DNA analysis, as there are lots of hairs. I can see roots coming out, and there's DNA in the roots. If you gather lots of hair, it's like you're grabbing lots of individuals and making an inventory. If you repeat this, you can estimate the reproduction rate of the population. You can estimate the mortality rate. You can estimate the population trajectory. But some years, you have to repeat the inventory, and that's what I do.
Garth must hurry, as there are still stations to visit and a few hours' drive through the mountains before arriving at base camp. Bruce McClellan is conducting a study in the Flathead Valley region on a population of grizzly bears made up of some 80 individuals. The study area covers 500 square kilometers. A dozen females are currently equipped with radio collars, but the researcher would need around 20 under observation.
That's it. I got everything I need.
Most of my research is on species and issues that we consider to be provincially significant and challenging. And the main thing we try to find out is what are the factors that limit their numbers? What is going on to make them rare, if they are rare, and why aren't there more? So you want to look at both the factors that kill them, why they die, and also factors that make them have babies, reproduce, survive well too.
The objective of the mission is to fit radio collars to 5 young females which have not yet had any young. It's an ambitious objective in just 3 days.
We pass in a helicopter and monitor the blueberry regions, hoping to see a bear. And it's the only season when they're sufficiently grouped and they're predictable. In other words, we know they'll be in a certain habitat.
All day, Garth and Bruce overfly the territory. No trace of grizzlies. When the sun goes down on the horizon, the 2 men must resign themselves and head home to base camp. They only have 2 days left in which to mark the 5 females. Garth Mowat and Bruce McClellan are getting ready for a second day's expedition in search of female grizzlies. The Flathead Valley region is an important habitat for grizzlies because it is the link between several populations in British Columbia, Alberta, and the United States.
Focus of my research with grizzly bears, it's more what factors limit their numbers in an industrialized landscape, like areas where, like this one, which has been very heavily logged, and it's had a lot of oil and gas exploration, it's had a lot of mining exploration, it's got hunters and fishermen and recreationists all here. So, you know, what are the major factors that cause the populations to go up and down?
Garth and Bruce have finally spotted a female. After putting her to sleep, they have around 30 minutes in which to take samples and measurements and fit a telemetry collar.
So this is probably a 3 or 4 year old female. So she hasn't had cubs yet, she's not full grown. But this is the perfect bear, what we're interested in.
It's not an adult. She's an adolescent. We'd like to know at what age she will have her first baby. We also want to fit a collar to find out how long she will survive, because we're very interested in the mortality rate.
Left, 5'2". Should be good, yeah, that's good.
The logged information is used to better understand the dynamics of grizzly bear populations. The comparison of data collected by Garth through the study of DNA and that of Bruce with telemetry enabled them to make unexpected discoveries.
Pretty, huh? Very nice little bear.
Bears are different from other mammals. They can grow throughout their lives. So for females, that's about the first 6 or 7 years of their lives. For the male, it can be 20 years. 90 kilos. We put a small piece of material on the face because the light bothers you when you sleep, and this cuts out the light a little.
Okay, so we're done. Good, safe place. Better to have her in the shade.
We've now learned from research that a 100-kilo bear can still live by eating plants alone. But if they're bigger than 200 kilos, they'll have trouble gaining weight regularly. So if a bear is bigger than 200 kilos, he'll need to eat meat during the year. Maybe not all year round. He might eat caribous in the spring or salmon in the autumn, but he'll need to eat meat during the year to add enough fat for the winter.
The researchers found that there were also significant differences between populations living in the mountains and eating mainly fruit, and those which live near rivers and eat salmon.
It's amazing the difference in the bears. Salmon make big bears. The bears are quite a bit bigger. The females will be double the size. And they look different. They'll have short fur often. And the mountain bears are smaller, but you know, the mountain bears eating huckleberries get fatter.
At the end of the second day, Garth and Bruce have only fitted one telemetry collar. The grizzlies have remained hidden in the forest, probably because of the heat, which does not suit them. They have only one more day in which to reach their goal.
After spending 6 weeks in my office, the best thing is just to get out and work on the ground for any reason at all. I love huckleberries. They're my favorite things. I can eat them all day long. It looks like a bear has only just passed by. He was a glutton. He ate everything.
Berries, just like salmon to certain populations, are essential for grizzly bears. This is what allows them to store the fat needed to survive the winter. Unfortunately, where you find fruit and salmon, you also find humans, which can lead to other problems. Garth Mowat recognizes that the challenges ahead are daunting, but the solutions lie in a better understanding of grizzlies and their habitats.
I think that the thing that will be more difficult to manage for grizzlies in the future is human habitation. There are more and more rural and urban expanses. People living just about anywhere. So there's more loss of habitat, and there's also the effect you get from roads, from trains, from farms, from pets.
Certain communities are more likely than others to receive a visit from grizzly bears. That's the case with these towns surrounded by the Rocky Mountains, which provide an excellent habitat for the grizzly bears.
So this is a map of the area that we would look after. Fernie is located here, there's Sparwood and Elkford. Of course, with the grizzly bears, there's a lot of interaction here. So we have hunters, we have hikers, we have huckleberry pickers, we have a lot of people that are utilizing that wilderness, that are interacting with those grizzly bears.
Wildlife conservation agent Joe Caravetta is working with Garth Mowat. It's his job to protect natural resources while ensuring the safety of those who use the territory. He's the one they call should a grizzly bear attack anyone.
What we have here is just a demonstration of the difference between a black bear skull and a grizzly bear skull. So this one here that I'm holding up here, this is a black bear. And this would be an average-sized grizzly bear, not an overly big grizzly bear, but an average-sized grizzly bear. But this is a pretty good-sized black bear. We use these sometimes for identifying attacks on people. So when they bite into a person like that, we take those measurements off of a person. Hopefully they're not dead, but sometimes people do die from grizzly bear attacks. And we'll use those measurements to help us assist in identifying which grizzly bear had actually attacked that person, or if it was a black bear, because you can see the difference between the teeth.
There's a little side channel here. And they may be on the dogwood berries, or they might actually be on the fish in the side channel. grizzly bear attacks are primarily defensive attacks, quite often mums with cubs or a bear on a carcass. And if the person knows a little bit about bear behavior and what to do in a defensive attack, and that is to not aggravate the bear any further, to leave the area ideally. We should back up a little bit. It's okay, you're okay.
For several years, Gillian Sanders was a guide to grizzly observation in the wild. She is now coordinator of a program to raise awareness of the need to protect and respect grizzly bears. This leads her to work closely with Garth Mowat.
Garth has been supportive of the project. I think Garth also sees the need towards human and grizzly bear coexistence, especially in threatened populations. For my project, I've been able to have the partnership between local biologists, the Conservation Officer Service of BC,
The programs to protect population of grizzlies, set up in the light of knowledge acquired, are already showing results. In recent years, grizzly bear populations have been increasing, which is causing problems of cohabitation with humans.
Now the new challenge is to manage to live with our success. We've been successful with conservation. The population is increasing, and now there are grizzlies coming into town. We'll have to learn to cohabit with this species. It's not a matter of hunting, it's a matter of cohabitation with certain species.
The expedition is coming to an end. Garth and Bruce have finally achieved their targets. Thanks to the new transmitter collars, they'll be able to gather extra data on the grizzly's lifestyle and draw up improved conservation plans. Even though he's aware of the challenges in store, that of grizzly bears and humans living in peaceful coexistence, Garth Mowat remains confident.
82. Just get her up in the shade.
I'm optimistic about what's coming for my children and for the animals too, when I look at just the case of the grizzlies over the last 20 years. We just have to learn to make conservation more of a priority in our daily lives. Nevertheless, I remain optimistic.
There are so many of them in the air, which indicates that this is an extraordinary place. They're coming down from everywhere. What fascinates me is learning their habits and strategies, which vary from day to day. They're adaptable. Somehow a bird's brain manages to adapt and find a way to tackle a particular challenge. For me, it's not so much about the bird having a nice plumage or a great beak or something. It's not about traditional ornithology, which is why I like the term birdwatcher. It's about looking for something different in birds.
An expert in nuclear medicine, Géraud Leroux is also a real enthusiast of winged fauna, which he observes and photographs all over the world. This great traveler uses every outing in the wild to widen his knowledge of bird behavior.
The bird is responsible for the propagation of life on Earth. For example, it spreads plant life, and biodiversity is largely attributable to birds. So for me, the bird has become the key to discovering how life became established, how it evolved, and how we are neglecting it. That's a least bitum, the smallest heron there is. And we have them here in Quebec. They're extremely rare and very difficult to spot because it's such a timid bird.
And that's a kind of camouflaging technique, pretending to be moving grass.
Jean shares his fascination with his wife Denise, who introduced him to birdwatching. For the last 30 years, they have traveled to over 100 countries to observe birds in their natural environment. Next stop is the United States, and more precisely, the region around Salt Lake City, which is a veritable migratory crossroads for between 2 and 5 million birds every year. On this journey, Jean wants to study the American white pelican. Experienced ornithologist Bill Fenimore accompanies him in the field.
The birds that live here, some are year-round residents, some are transitory migrants. Some actually come here for breeding and then move south in winter. But those birds that come through here and use those elements of Great Salt Lake and this surrounding area have adapted and evolved with these ecosystems, so it's very important to them.
The Great Salt Lake is the biggest saltwater lake on the American continent. In some parts, the water is up to 9 times more saline than in the ocean. No fish can live here, just a few species of crustacean and several varieties of seaweeds. In the early 1930s, a system of dikes was set up to recover water from the surrounding mountains and create a large freshwater marshland around the lake. A true feasting ground for birds.
We got up very early, like everyone else who wants to observe nature, especially birds, because things happen early in the day. Just as we're having breakfast, the birds have their breakfast too, so we're very close to Salt Lake City in Utah. We're on a reserve at Farmington, where there's plenty of water, and what I'm particularly interested in here is the white pelican, which goes after fish in groups. I can see a lot of them over there, on the other side of the lake, all together. It's beautiful. There must be around 100 of them.
The American white pelican is different from the brown pelican. The brown pelican lives around the coastal areas of the United States, and they individually will fly and dive into the water and catch fish. The American white pelican is an inland species. It comes inland to freshwater lakes and ponds and river systems, and they feed in a cooperative manner. It's a very unique adaptation.
They gather together and adapt in different shapes. It might be a circle or a continuous line. And they plunge their beaks into the water in a kind of scooping motion. and move forward together, beating their feet to unsettle the fish. So fish jump into their net, and when it's full, they lift their head and swallow them all.
The American white pelican feeds mostly on fish and consumes up to 1.8 kilos a day. Thanks to the yellow-skinned sac beneath its beak, it can swallow several kilos of fish, with which it feeds its young.
After they have finished foraging, and as the sun is getting higher in the sky during the morning, and the thermal currents begin to form, the hot air starts to rise, they will fly and catch these thermal currents and slowly spiral up until they get high enough altitude that then they can head out towards Gunnison Island in Great Salt Lake, which is the rookery where they have their young.
Right in the middle of Great Salt Lake is Gunnison Island. This is where the American whites settle in spring for a period of 4 to 5 months. It's an ideal place for them to raise their young, away from predators. However, they sometimes have to travel over 100 kilometers a day to find food for their young in the marshes around the Great Salt Lake. Jean is impatient to head over to Gunnison Island to study the behavior of these tireless birds. By daybreak, the wind is howling across Salt Lake City, making a journey across to the colony of nesting American white pelicans on Gunnison Island impossible.
As you can see from the waves and the strength of the wind that's blowing now, it would be very dangerous for us to try to launch the boat and to go across to Gunnison Island. So it's not going to be possible today. We will have to wait and try again tomorrow.
By afternoon, the wind has calmed enough to allow a small boat to venture into the vast marshlands around the Great Salt Lake.
The waters around Great Salt Lake, these freshwater ponds and lakes, are very shallow. Imagine pouring a glass of water onto your kitchen table. It would not be very deep, but it would cover a large surface area. And Great Salt Lake and the ponds around Great Salt Lake are very much like that because the land is like a table.
A wide variety of birds are found in these marshes, including the white-faced ibis, a large wader that comes to nest and feed on crayfish, insects, and frogs.
The white-faced ibis here has its name derived from the fleshy white area around the mandible that gets white during the breeding season. That's the only time of the year it gets that white plumage.
You can see all the gulls and ibises jockeying for position.
Jean is particularly interested in the way birds interact in their environment. Observing nature always teaches him something new about the complexity of their lifestyles.
With the orange head. Oh, yes.
Sometimes a day that seems to promise little produces a special moment.
I've never seen that in 30 years of watching birds. I've seen it in the cinema and on TV, but this was right in front of me, just 10 feet away. We saw the whole thing, the little beak suddenly appearing, then a bit of head and some wing. It stopped now because it's tired, but it's starting again.
The energy coming out of an egg. It's extraordinary to see a chick fighting to come to life. A human birth is amazing to see, but so is birth in nature, because they're picking up the baton and taking over. I think that for future generations, it's important that these birds are around. A life form shouldn't be allowed to disappear because there are grave consequences.
Jean shares his discoveries at the awareness conferences he gives. He believes it's important to show people the numerous facets of bird behavior.
You realize that as our modern society develops in a more insular way, people know less and less about these things. I realize that basically we are illiterates when it comes to nature. I visit schools to try to review our position in the whole chain of life. For me, the bird is key in bringing people around to a new understanding of what nature should be.
The following day, temperatures are milder. It's a perfect opportunity for an expedition to Gunnison Island, a site that is not open to the public. On this occasion, Bill has permission to visit the island with biologists from Utah's Division of Wildlife Resources. Gunnison Island, where the American white pelicans of Salt Lake City nest, is covered with rocks. Aside from a few small shrubs, no trees grow. Yet this inhospitable landscape shelters one of the biggest colonies of American white pelicans in North America. Between 10 and 15,000 pelicans gather here, which is about 16% of the worldwide population.
The pelicans are circling.
On this expedition, Jean accompanies biologist John Luft, who is trying to determine the number of birds currently in the colony.
And today, what are your expectations?
Well, I'm hoping that we're having a good production year. Over the last 3 or 4 years, our production has been way down. Historically, each nest that has been initiated out there would have about a 60% success rate, and the last few years we've had between 20 and 25% success.
This situation intrigues Jean Leveillé. Like John Luft, he is curious about what has caused this drop in the birth rate. Mostly, he would like to know if this spring the adult pelicans have fished enough to ensure the upkeep of the colony. After more than 1 hour, the boat finally arrives within sight of Gunnison Island. Jean is impressed by the distance pelicans must travel every day to find food. And making it onto the island is not as easy as he might have thought.
We've already experienced very salty water, but this is so salty that you almost float, which makes it difficult to wade through without falling over.
We're right here at the moment. We're gonna climb up here and we'll be able to see colonies in this bay and in here.
To reach the colony, Jean and his associates have to climb a steep hill. As the American white pelicans are highly sensitive to the slightest disturbance, the group advances quietly.
They're extremely susceptible to disturbance, especially human disturbance, and so they, when they get pressured, they'll just abandon their nest. There's only been one person that lived out here on the island, and he lived here for about 16 months, And during that time, the pelicans left it and didn't nest here.
Then the longed-for moment arrives. A colony of American white pelicans, something very few humans have seen at close quarters, is right there in front of them.
Isn't this magnificent? This is a wonderful angle. Usually you're looking up at the birds. Here we're able to look down.
By studying the behavior of American white pelicans, Jean notices the highly developed strategies that allow them to survive in this difficult environment.
The birds have chosen an island because there are no predators who can reach them there. Raccoons are too lazy for such a long swim time. Red foxes don't like to swim either, and the birds notice this.
While the biologists begin counting the birds, Jean notices the interaction between parents and fledglings.
The way that two birds with eggs and a fledgling cope, it's interesting because they're not like mammals. The male mammal reproduces, then leaves, and doesn't care for the chicks. Birds are very different. Both take part in the education and the protection of their young.
One of the adults will go and forage, come back, feed the young bird, and the other pelican will take off and go forage, and they'll just switch on and off. The first pelican that took off to go fish didn't come back within 3 days. The other pelican would just go and abandon the baby ones.
During the rearing period, the parents have to catch up to 68 kilos of fish to meet the needs of fast-growing young pelicans.
Not all of them are good at fishing. Some parents come back with barely anything. A parent isn't prepared to sacrifice itself for its young, so it will keep the food for itself, not give it to the chick. That's why there's a pretty high mortality rate if there isn't enough fish around, or the parents aren't so good at fishing.
The visit to the island confirms biologist John Luft's worst fears. This year has seen another large drop in the number of birds born in the colony.
Well, it looks like we're a lot fewer birds than what we expected. It looks like a lot of nest failures for this year, but there's primarily a lot of adults, and there's fewer younger birds and fewer birds sitting on nests. One of the reasons is probably the fish. The fisheries around the lake have dried up, so there's fewer places for them to forage. A lot of other pelican colonies, they're nesting on a place that's surrounded by fresh water and fish. So they can just come off of the island directly and be able to fish. These pelicans can't do that. They have to fly miles before they're able to do any fishing.
During this adventure, Jean has been able to observe the challenge facing American white pelicans as they strive to adapt and reproduce in this isolated place. For Bill Fenimore, this incursion into the life of the Gunnison Island colony is an experience he will never forget.
You saw all the aspects of their behavior at this stage. That was fascinating for me, and added the last piece of the puzzle that I had in my mind wanting to see, because I had never been to this rookery.
These few days spent in the Great Salt Lake region have thrown into sharp relief how important this environment is to the migrant birds that pass through there.
I tell people often who are not birders to think of it like a gas station. At certain times of the year, we have more than half the population of some bird species. As Utah's population grows, we see new subdivisions and new shopping centers and new highways and new areas. It's important to keep some areas wild and keep them open for the wildlife so that we can still have that connection also.
Jean Leveillet's travels around the world have made him all too aware of the fragility of certain environments. Discovering the world of birds makes him want to share his experiences and his knowledge through his photographs, writings, and conferences.
What I want most of all is to illustrate the importance of each constituent of life. Basically, what we have here is a beautiful planet. And why is it so beautiful? Because there's so much of it. There's extraordinary biodiversity. So you go to a place to observe a particular feature of that biodiversity. For me, the bird is key in trying to understand this mysterious planet we live on, where there is so much exciting, fascinating life. But sometimes we forget to look.
There's been diving in the region for a long time, but people have never thought about whether they should approach a seal or how they should approach it. A harbour seal has a small head like a dog's. It's very cute. People react the same as with a dog, even with a dog they don't know. They try to stroke the seal, to interact with it and attract it to them. And a seal is curious and very agile in the water. It'll spin around and jump to mark its territory. The tourist will start spinning with the seal, and when the seal sees that, it marks its territory more and more. But people don't realize its territorial behavior, and the seal is saying this is his space and he'd like the diver to go away. But in fact, the diver understands the opposite. That often happens.
Stéphanie Piedesot has always been fascinated with the marine environment. After studying in France and the USA, she finally settled in Gaspésie, a particularly fine place for observing marine mammals.
What fascinates me is the whole dynamic of the marine environment, to see how everything's interrelated. And the small bryozoa has its part to play just as much as the huge blue whale. It's also the habitat, all the mysteries that we don't yet understand. In a marine environment, there are so many things to discover. It's that world that fascinates me the most. There are 12 to 15 seals straight ahead. 12 to 15 seals ahead.
In 2006, Stephanie joined the team at ROM, the Marine Mammals Observation Network, where she works as a biologist on the protection and conservation of the whales and seals of the St. Lawrence.
The Marine Mammals Observation Network started as a project bringing together several people to observe marine mammals because there were stakeholders in the field who were worried about the problems facing marine mammals due to the number of tourists and the increase in human activity on the St. Lawrence. From there, we developed different research projects and education projects, raising awareness about marine mammals. It's because there's a seal right there. I'm being followed. He's under the kayak. We want to understand the nature of the observation activities at sea. That includes all the whale watching cruises, kayakers and divers who go out to see a bit of marine life. We want to see how those players interact on the water with the marine mammals.
Among the species of marine mammals present in the St. Lawrence estuary and Gulf, the harbour seal, by its behaviours and living habits, is particularly exposed to contact with humans, and that makes it vulnerable.
In this region, we mainly find 4 species of seal: the harbour seal, the grey seal, the hooded seal, and the harp seal. The harbour seal is the smallest species we have in the region, and it also has the smallest population. There are only 15 to 24,000 harbour seals in the St. Lawrence. It reproduces mainly on the shores, so it doesn't have the same dynamic at all as the other species. It's the only one that's really coastal and reproduces in the summer.
On the shores of the St. Lawrence, there are several haul-out sites where the harbour seals gather in colonies in spring and summer to give birth to their pups, to rest and to reproduce.
We realised that at the harbour seals haul-out site for reproducing at Petit Gaspé, there were a lot of visitors who came either on foot, by kayak, by boat, or to dive. We wondered to what extent this traffic could affect the reproduction of the harbour seal in the short term and in the long term. From there, I approached Gwenaël Beauplay at Université Laval. We wanted to set up a joint project with him looking at it from the scientific point of view, while we were looking at it from more the conservation point of view. So we might put some measures in place to protect that haul-out site.
Gwenaël Beauplay is a biologist and a professor in the Department of Biology at Université Laval. In 2008, he set up a long-term research program on the harbour seals in the St. Lawrence.
There's been a whole evolution in the population of harbour seals in the history of Canada and Quebec. In particular, there's been a ban on hunting the species since 1975. It's the only species of seal with a hunting ban in Canada, and since they're not hunted, we had very little information on the status of the population.
To date, very few studies have been carried out on harbour seals, because this species is found in smaller numbers than most other seal species. That means that its impact on commercial fish stocks is slight. In order to have better records of the state of the population in the St. Lawrence estuary, between May and July, Gwenaël and his team mark the babies from that year.
To find the animals, we mark them with a little hat on their head. The hats are numbered, so that means we can identify them more easily in the water.
Some seals are also fitted with VHF transmitters and dive recorders stuck onto their skin. Harmless to the animals, these devices allow them to be identified more easily and provide important data for monitoring growth.
The ones we want individually are 39, 8 and 25. Is that right?
Kip 5.
In total, we must have about 15 dive records on animals, some of which we need to recover and others that will leave a bit longer.
On the left, there.
Setting off in pursuit of a seal requires a lot of skill and caution. As the boat approaches, the seals go and hide among the rocks, making the boatman's task much more complicated. While Gwenaël Beauplay and his team are looking for seal pups in the waters around the Bic Islands, about 300 kilometers away, Stephanie Piedesot takes advantage of low tide to go to the Petit Gaspé haul-out site. She's accompanied by Ray Couture, one of Gwenaël's students taking part in the project.
We have to cover the whole haul-out site inside half an hour before the tide comes in, or else we could be trapped on the rocks. We don't want any tourists on the haul-out because that would make the seals go back into the water, and we can't count them. We also don't want any dive boats or kayaks because it's the same thing, and if the seals go back in the water, we can't count them properly. The ideal window is fine weather, no waves, low tide, no one on the haul-out site, and then we can do the count properly as today.
Can you give me the exact time?
We started at 1:41 p.m.
Thanks.
The majority of Ray's work is going to be monitoring behaviours of the seals. She'll sit on a rock for, let's say, 4 hours, and she'll observe all the seals' behaviours, regular behaviours. Or if there's an introduction of humans, she'll observe the seals' reactions in relation to the human approach. Her other job is also to do the counts. The idea of seal counts is to be able to compare seal numbers on the haul-out site between 1 year and the next. We're trying to see if there are any trends. Is it a period of increase, or are we in a cycle of decline on that haul-out site?
The harbour seal lives all year round in the St. Lawrence estuary. That's one of the reasons why studying it is so interesting. For biologist Mike Hamill, the harbour seal, like the beluga, is an excellent bioindicator as to the health of the St. Lawrence, because it lives for up to 30 years and is at the top of the food chain.
The harbour seal is a resident. It's here all the year round, so it takes all its food and contaminants from here. So that gives us an indication of what's in our system here. The other thing is that there are harbour seals all over Canada, so some on the west coast and some on the east coast. So if we want to make comparisons with our populations to see if they're more polluted or less polluted, we can make those comparisons.
An unusual characteristic of harbour seals is that the pups are able to swim as soon as they're born, whereas other seal species enter the water only after weaning.
Obviously, in our work, we minimize our impact as much as possible. So, for example, we never go out to a colony 2 days running. We never do that, just so that we give them a bit of a rest. When we capture a pup, we make sure that the capture lasts no more than 15 minutes. Over 15 minutes, there could be a risk of abandonment, particularly in the first week. So we have to be really very careful not to disturb the mother-baby bond. He's a fine one too. We study pups in particular because it's a critical period in the animal's life. It spends 4 weeks accumulating its fat reserves. These animals, the pups, are born at about 10 kilograms, and they'll be weaned at about 25-30 kilograms. 28.0. So that means that in 4 weeks, the pups put on between 20 and 25 kilograms, which is a considerable mass. But it's really important because that mass, that fat reserve, will allow them to survive in the 6 months or the year following their weaning, while they're in their juvenile phase. Do you want to go back to the water? It's really crucial to understand how the animals grow, and then to be able to say that with this rate of growth, it has so many chances of surviving into the future. Therefore, it has so many chances of reaching adulthood, and so many chances of being part of the future population and producing young for the continued existence of the St. Lawrence population. The mother's found her baby.
While Ray Couture continues counting the seals on the Petit Gaspé haul-out site, Stephanie takes advantage of the low tide to collect seal excrement, which will later be analysed.
The idea of collecting excrement is to be able to measure the secretion of a hormone in the excrement, the corticosteroid hormone. It allows us to see the levels of stress in individuals. We want to measure whether the individuals that are exposed to humans on the haul-out site are more stressed than those on a haul-out where they're not exposed to humans. For that, we also take samples from another haul-out site, a control site, where there's no human presence at all. Using these two sites as our sample, we can compare to see if we find more stress in the animals on the haul-out site exposed to humans than in those that are not. We've done a good count. We've managed to count around 100 individuals in the area with around 25 to 30 pups. That's a good average. And we also managed to collect 5 excrement samples, which is very good. It's the best count we've had so far. It's a good number of samples. We're pleased with our count today.
Even though the harbour seal population in the St. Lawrence estuary isn't endangered, some stakeholders in the field still consider it to be vulnerable. Several factors, including poaching, collisions with ships, and disturbance on haul-out sites, are threatening its integrity. Two days later, Gwenaël Bouplé takes advantage of the low tide to make another trip to the Bic Islands. Mike Hamill, who has been marking harbour seals for several years, is collaborating with Gwenaël in this study.
Give me the weights, yes, thank you.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, how are you? What are the numbers of animals like?
It's going well for births. We've got about 50% more than last year. Last year we had 60 to 70 births, and this year we're around 100 births.
100? We have the impression today that the population has increased quite a lot. With the work we've done here, several years ago we used to capture 30 or 40 per year. And this year, Gwen is talking about capturing about 100. Well, that means the population has increased a lot in the last few years.
He's over there. In 1975, the population was very small. People talked about 400 animals in the whole estuary. We now have that number on Bic Island alone. 93. We'll have to wait a while to have the precise results on the number and profusion of these animals on Bic, but also in the whole estuary. He's a bit lighter. 22.5, 23.0, sorry.
Some results of the current studies won't be available for several years. But the data collected so far is already providing precious information on the health of the harbour seal population in the estuary.
Les niveaux de BPC sont assez élevés dans la population ici dans l'estuaire.
The level of PCBs is quite high in the population here in the estuary. At first we wanted to compare the seal with the beluga to see if we could use the seal as a model. But over time we learnt that seals can probably digest or metabolize contaminants in a different way from belugas. So it maybe wasn't a good model from that point of view. So we can just look at the level of contaminants for this population here. The level of PCBs is higher, but if we compare it to the seals in Western Canada, the dioxin level is lower. So they're more contaminated in one sense, but less contaminated in another.
With the aim of protecting the Petit Gaspé haul-out site, several stakeholders in the field have got together in order to manage the human activities that might have an impact on the mammals and their habitats.
We decided to set up a coordinating group where several of us are working on the management of the Petit Gaspé haul-out site because we don't want it to be destroyed or deteriorated due to the presence of humans. Some seals are very curious. They want to try things. They're very bold with divers. They want to test the equipment. They want to see what flippers are, what a diver is. They'll tend to nibble at all the equipment to see what it is and what it's like. The problem is that they become used to humans. The young ones are less and less fearful. They go to divers out of curiosity, but logically, a seal in its real life must look after its primary biological functions. It shouldn't have anything to do with divers that aren't part of its normal biological cycle. It's a waste of time and of energy for the young seal. What we want is for the population to continue to reproduce without declining. The idea is more to look for solutions to benefit the haul-out site without creating a disturbance. For example, putting in a raised viewing platform so people can observe without walking directly on the haul-out. Maybe coming by kayak, but keeping at a distance to observe with binoculars and to study behaviours, etc.
Since she's been working in the field of conservation, Stephanie Piedesser has observed a certain evolution in the mindsets of the different stakeholders. Efforts to raise awareness have been beneficial, but there's still room for improvement.
People are more and more aware of environmental issues. And they're also aware that if you go and observe wildlife, you're in the wild, you're not in an aquarium. So the idea is to respect the animal that's in its own territory. Given that the public is aware of that, and there's more and more reporting, there's more and more popular awareness. The people in charge of cruises are also trying to turn their cruises into greener products. And they realize that by selling a greener product that's more environmentally respectful, they'll also attract a new clientele.
Ils vont accrocher une nouvelle clientèle.
When I started in biology, I didn't think at all about the impact that humans could have on the environment. It was the project characterizing sea activities that made me realize that humans, through their activities, could have a major impact on the life of this or that species. As I've developed, I've realized that it's not so much the animals that interest me as the whole ecosystem. You realize that it's all very well to want to protect an animal, but there's no point if you don't protect its habitat.
These bison were not released into the park. They were released to the north of the park. Then a group of them ventured inside. Then they stayed there, possibly because they found themselves a good food source. The purpose here is not necessarily to have as many bison as possible. It is to have a viable population that can be maintained in the long term.
Daniel Fortin and his team are at the highest point of the Prince Albert National Park in Saskatchewan. In this protected natural environment, the biologist studies the largest land mammal in North America, the bison.
There are two main objectives. The first is to understand how the bison fits into the ecosystem here. The second is to try to reduce the conflict between humans and bison. For example, this population will periodically leave the park and cause damage on the outside. So what we try to do is to find a way to reduce their impact in a way that is acceptable to a national park.
In bygone times, hundreds of thousands of plains bison roamed the Canadian prairies. Decimated by hunting, by the late 19th century, only a dozen or so specimens remained. Thanks to protection and conservation measures, the Canadian government has succeeded in saving the species from extinction. In 1969, around 50 plains bison were released in the hills north of Prince Albert National Park. That same year, some of the bison migrated inside the park boundaries to establish the only population of Canadian plains bison roaming free in their historical natural habitat.
What fascinates me about the bison is that, firstly, it's an interesting species to observe for a researcher because it's constantly on the move. So for someone like me, who tries to understand what influences the spatial distribution of animals, it's an interesting species, especially in a naturally fragmented landscape like this one, with openings, clearings, and meadows in a forest.
Stretching over an area of around 4,000 square kilometers, the Prince Albert National Park is mostly made up of conifer and hardwood forest with scattered clearings. Constantly in search of food, bison move from meadow to meadow using a highly developed network of tracks. To study their behavior, Daniel and his team need to get as close as possible to the animals.
Daniel, there's wolf tracks. There's a wolf pack that sort of roams this area. This is a beautiful track, right? You can see the pad very closely, and then the two fingers and the front fingers, and there you have the claws digging in. This is very fresh, because we were through here yesterday, so we know that these tracks occurred sometimes after 5 or 6 p.m. yesterday.
It usually takes pretty large packs to attack a species as big as a bison. The bigger the pack, the more they have to attack large prey like bison, moose, and wapiti. Bison have highly developed senses of smell and hearing.
Having recorded the position of wolf tracks using GPS, the team advances quietly towards the clearing.
Yeah, they're in the meadow. There's a bison in the middle of the meadow. We've really got a group of them here. Maybe we can go round and come out further up. If we head into the woods, there may be some bison lying down. It might be easier if we go around because we'll make less noise. They're all at the edge of the wood. No luck. Because when I was down there were still some there at the edge of the wood. But by the time we'd crossed, they'd...
Unfortunately, the bison were quicker and are already on their way to another pasture. Through the day, Danielle realizes that it will be impossible to catch the herd. They will have to try again tomorrow. To succeed in his plan to study plains bison, Danielle tries to observe their behavior as often as he can. But bison are not always easy to find. Danielle and his students are going to try again today to track down one of the herds in the park. An adult bison can weigh up to 1,000 kilos and measure around 2 meters. The group advances cautiously along the track.
Bison are pretty good at telling you when they're not happy with you. They have some very clear signs, like they will maybe turn to the side and show you their body, or they will lift their tail up. So those are a couple really clear signs that they are not happy with your presence.
This population is not so dangerous. There's always an element of risk when you're dealing with a bison, but it's not so dangerous because they're not used to human beings. When they start being used to seeing humans and reacting to them, that's when problems can start.
Okay. There's a large group also over there.
The size and structure of herds of bisons vary constantly according to the season. Females and calves stick together summer and winter, while males are mostly solitary or form small groups. During the mating season, which runs from mid-July to late August, the males come to join the females.
I counted 63 for now. We'll need to do a more accurate count. It's a large group, although we've seen them twice that size. There are probably about 15 right over there. When we're observing their behavior, we try to get within 100 meters, maybe a little less. Then we settle in the woods and try to camouflage ourselves as much as possible. We don't want to disturb the animals or for them to know we're there. We want to see their natural behavior. We've got an increase in sound because there's a new male in the group. Part of our job is trying to ascertain the exact number of bison, And that's what Géraud is trying to do, to arrive at an accurate figure of exactly how many bison there are.
We're also trying to recognize individuals using cameras and photography. And so what we're doing is not only taking pictures of animals and identifying them by shapes and sizes of their horns, but also by other characteristics such as marks, things that are permanent, tail missing, something like that. And so once we get a database of the animals that are in the population, we can monitor them over years and estimate things like survival, mortality, and the number of animals in the population from year to year.
Thanks to observations carried out in the field, Danielle has been able to ascertain that the selection of plant life in a pasture and the spatial distribution of bison are also influenced by the risk of predation.
There will still be plenty of food left when they leave here. Bison usually leave before the food supply is exhausted and before their energy gains diminish. So we believe that when facing a predator like the wolf, which has a good spatial memory, it's better if your position in the space, in the park in this case, shouldn't be predictable. So the more you move and keep moving, the less chance there is that the wolf will be able to find you. But wolves usually have a better chance of finding a large group, partly because they tend to leave more of their scent around, but also because they cover more space. On the other hand, being in a large group means less risk for different reasons. One is that in a large group, there are more individuals on the lookout at any given moment. There's also what's known as the dilution effect, meaning that if the wolves go on the attack and you're out on your own, then there's a good chance you're the one they'll come after. Whereas if there are, say, 88 of you, you have a 1 in 88 chance of being the victim.
The population of plains bison in the Prince Albert National Park is now 200. As they are not fenced within the park boundaries, the bison sometimes venture outside onto private farmland.
The park was doing its thing, but they were coming out a lot on farmers' land, and the park no longer is responsible for them at that point. We organized ourselves in 2006, incorporated our organization, and raised some money, and have been working at it ever since. And it's really improved the relationship between the ranchers and the bison, and that's really what the goal was.
When they receive a call signaling the presence of bison, members of the association gather to supervise the field borders and drive the animals back towards the park.
Having 1 or 2 bison outside the park isn't usually such a big problem for landowners. But when you've got a group of 50 in your field, then a lot more damage can be done. It's important for us to study them in autumn because that's when problems and conflicts with the park's neighbors tend to occur. So it's vital for us to figure out exactly what influences their spatial distribution and their movements in autumn.
You can't see them, there's too many hills. So we're going to drive around. The road goes that way, and it's a very bad road. We're hoping it's not too wet. We'll get as close as we can. Hopefully we can see them, and we'll take the horses at that point. There's a spot there where they lay down often, so we'll go try and look.
The team has to reach the bison quickly. The sooner they get there, the less chance there is of the animals damaging the farmland. To better understand how the different herds of bison move inside Prince Albert National Park, Daniel Fortin and his students have identified and mapped more than 200 trails used by bison.
This is the whole park, and the bison are in the southwest part. We're going to focus on this part here, where there are a lot of excursions, where bison leave the park. It's important to identify the exit points. But it's not just a case of putting a fence up in the area, because they'll just go around it. What we want to do is to try to reduce the chances of them getting close to the boundary in the first place. So it's a matter of cutting off a certain number of links, which are the black lines you see here. These are theoretical, and they correspond broadly to the bison trails in the park. Today, we're going to check on the fence that has been erected here to see if it's still in place. We'll go take a look, do maintenance work, then complete the missing section of fence.
In the first instance, we try to figure out how the bison move around within the park, knowing that the park is like a network linking parcels of resources, that is, the meadows, which form a kind of matrix in the forest. So by mapping the bison trails, we can try to figure out how the bison use this network of theirs. So for now, we're still trying to figure out their movements. We're working on fences, trying different types, and moving them around to maximize their effectiveness in limiting bison movements. And in the long term, we hope it will work as an adaptive management measure and help us restrict their excursions. That's why we work in close collaboration with the people who run the park.
This is very promising, especially the 2 wires that I see there, I think.
I think so too, and that'll make it easier to move.
Yeah.
And I think once we determine how long it takes for the bison to figure out that they can't get through there and then create this new trail, for that period of time, I'm hoping we'll have effectively stopped a lot of bison from moving towards the park boundary.
What we're trying to do is figure out why the bison are where they are. There are lots of reasons for that, notably the risk of predation, but also the search for food. Within the park itself, we can explain a lot of the spatial distribution from the energy gains they make in different sectors. We figure it's probably the same outside the park. So right now, as it's autumn and the vegetation is dying inside the park due to the senescence of plant life, we wonder whether they venture outside the park because that's where new vegetation is growing after the harvest.
We picked up a caller. We had a pretty strong signal here on the scanner. So probably a kilometer, for sure closer than 2 kilometers. So, but we did pick one up. So yeah, a very strong signal. So they're around somewhere.
Because of the growing population, they often start to use more space. We've also noticed an expansion of the range of bison northward and a little westward, but also outside the park. Once they're used to venturing into sectors, they develop the habit. And when there's good vegetation outside the park in autumn, then they'll keep going there until we find a way to regulate the problem.
Gord and his team have finally spotted the bison. The group of horsemen ride up slowly to avoid creating any panic that might risk hurting the animals.
Well, A good result. We've found bison on this land, and we were able to move them back to the park. And so a good result. The tolerance to the situation has increased significantly, and really the goal is to reduce conflict.
There was a time when the plains bison roamed the prairies in complete freedom. Since then, their habitat has shrunk considerably. Today in Canada, there remain no more than 4 herds living in the wild or semi-wild, along with a few small groups in captivity, representing in total around 1,000 head of bison. The Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada classifies the plains bison as an endangered species.
One reason there aren't more bison in North America is because there isn't necessarily anywhere to put them. This is a species that needs a lot of space, so it's quite easy to come into conflict with humans.
Danielle Fortin thinks the plains bison plays an essential role within the Prince Albert National Park ecosystem, hence the need to protect them and look after their conservation.
For me, it has an important role. It's a herbivore, so it's going to influence the plant communities, and it's going to influence the distribution of the wolf. So it's a very important species in this ecosystem. I think it's important to consider that in the beginning there were bison. All this area is part of the historical range of the bison. So they really do have a very important role within the ecosystem. And if you're talking about the integrity of the ecosystem of Prince Albert National Park, then bison are a part of that.